Welcome back to the dramatic conclusion to the all AMD gaming build, better than Linus's. The all-new Pure Loop liquid all-in-one water cooling unit features a doubly decoupled inline water pump for reduced vibration and noise, while the Pure Wings 2 fans provide ultra-silent operation. Available in multiple radiator sizes, the Pure Loop is the price-conscious choice for your next build. To learn more, click the Be Quiet link below. So I gotta make sense of this mess, and I've gotta add more mess to it. I still have to add the 3 front fans. I've gotta put these wires back in there for the GPU. I've gotta do the rear fan. I might not even do a rear fan. I should do a rear fan, but I might not. Yeah, so we got some stuff we gotta do today. If you didn't see the previous part 1, part 2 to this, you should go and check it out so you can see how nice this soft tubing turned out. Although you can see it now, you'll see how it was thought out and how it was run. But we are very, very close to attempting to fire this up. So I've gotta put the rear fan on there, the front fans, like I said, finish up the wiring, add the power supply to it, and then it's essentially done. So we're switching from 140mm fans to 120mm fans, which the only thing that kind of sucks about that is the fact that a little bit less CFM overall, but I think it should be plenty. The thing that kind of sucks about these fans, and yes, I know Corsair makes fans now that has the lights on both sides. I'm gonna see the glow off the rings. Remember, the light loop fans have lights in the hub and in the border, but when they're like this, I'm not gonna be able to see a whole lot of it. But I want all the fans to be uniform, like the same kind. I can't stand mismatched fans. Otherwise, I would have run the 360 on the top and then still run my 140 uni fans. But I cannot stand when fans don't match. The fans initially, the ones that came with it, were on this side of the bracket, right here. I've now switched them to the inside of the bracket because if you look inside now, it closes up some of that gap between the reservoir in these fans, which is about the same gap, maybe a tiny bit more gap than between the graphics card and the res, which makes the res a little more centered. If the fans were on the outside, that's another 25mm of gap we'd have there, and then it looked really imbalanced. So I decided to move the fans up slightly. Since I can't move the bracket up like I wanted, because I don't seem to be able to find any sort of cross piece for it, I just put the fans at their topmost location. That way half the bottom fan's air will go into the top compartment and half will go into the bottom. They're not sealed off, so there's still gonna be plenty of airflow for everything else in this chassis. This chassis is not that airtight, so not to mention there's just not that much heat load that's gonna be in here. Sure, a water-cooled graphics card and a CPU with this many cores is definitely, you know, a higher power part than normal. There's still plenty of ventilation in this chassis. So if I were half as smart as I think I am, I would have put this fan in there earlier before I have all these cables and everything in the way. But I'm only half as smart as I think I am. Not as smart as I think I am. I blame this on the slap from earlier. I like to have rear exhaust fans, even though if I only have exhaust fans on the top, that means all the air coming out of the case goes through the radiator. Technically, any air going out the back is not going through the rad. But it always just looks so empty to me when there's not one there. It's more of just a design choice, I guess, more than a necessity. But I can't help it. I don't think push-pull is necessary, but the nice thing is I can add push-pull later if I decide that it needs it, because by popping the top vent off, I could just one at a time remove screws and add a fan, put the screws through, add a fan, put the screws through, put the wires down, plug them into Commander Pro or the second Commander Pro or whatever I would need to control all of them. But I think the amount of fans that are in here is gonna be plenty to keep this cool. This is another benefit to soft tubing. I have to put that M.2 in right there. If this was all hard tubing, right, and I had to take this cover off, trying to work around that would suck, but I can just be like, boop, take the screw, and there we go. Soft tubing clearly has its benefits, and I think people need to stop giving other people a hard time who choose to use soft tubing and just be like, hey, nice computer, I like that. Or if you don't like it, just don't say anything. Y'all don't have to be
ducks.
Just a nice little benefit to soft tubing there. There's pros and cons to all, you know. You can make it look clean like I showed you in our last part by having the tubing lengths be just right so that they're not causing the fittings to all, you know, what makes, I think people think soft tubing looks kind of unorganized. It's not the tubes themselves. It's the fact that fittings end up like, you know, doing stuff like this and they're all like crooked. But if you get the links just right to where everything sort of rests at perfect 90-degree angles, then it just looks that much better. You know, and the fact that it's black also really helps. It's not gonna discolor. It's not, at least not where you can see it if it does. I really hope this all boots first time. I don't care how many computer builds I've done, I still get worried about that first boot. So here is what the wiring looks like on the back side. Fortunately, I've got plenty of room right here to put the NZXT, or not the NZXT, but the Corsair. And actually, if I take this off, I will gain even more space. So I've got plenty of room right here to like two-sided tape the Commander Pro and then the lighting module. Because I have 7 fans and the little LED, like, or the Commander Pro LED box thing only works 6 fans. I've got to run double the amount of them for 1 extra fan. So the saga of stupid design decisions that Cooler Master has chosen to make on this case has now made it so I've got to take this back panel off and modify it. So you see the way the bracket is? My concern was that I wasn't going to be able to actually fit a DisplayPort or an HDMI cable in there and make the bend to this grommet. Look at where the grommet is. Why didn't they just make this grommet bigger? Do they think this little bit of ventilation in this size of a case was going to make a big enough difference? Because if they had just made a bigger freaking grommet here like they should have, then the cable could go straight through into that mount. After all, this is exactly where the plate is mounted when you get this, like the case. This is the way it comes installed, assuming that's where it should be if you're planning on using it. Except for they really did a stupid thing by not making the grommet big enough to line up with the freaking inputs. Look at that. It lines up now with the graphics card. Oh my God. It's almost like somebody thought of something. What is that? The second time now I've had to fix something on this case that they didn't design right? More like Cooler stupid. What I'm gonna do next is going to probably trigger so many people on so many levels. I'm going to be firing it up. I've unplugged the water pump so it doesn't turn on. We don't want it to run dry. But I'm going to be firing it up right now with the graphics card plugged in to the monitor. Monitor is on, yes. And I'm going to let it run long enough to see if it will post. Because believe it or not, the water blocks will provide enough passive cooling, just being a metal surface absorbing heat, to allow me to at least see. Okay, well, all the lights work, so that's a good sign. Holy cow, does that look like a trade show or what? Looks like we just went to Computex. Okay, we're looking for a post here. Give us a post. It's still boot cycling, as you can see right there. There's our second cycle. Remember, Ryzen likes to reboot a couple times. Hey, we got a post. Yes, shut it down. Now, you guys get to see what Phil comes up with. So it looks pretty damn good if I don't say so myself. I was really kind of torn on what I wanted to do with the color. I didn't know if I wanted to do red fans. Initially I had all red fans, the lighting set to red. Again, just showcasing the power of RGB where you can make it any color you want. I ended up doing white lighting on the fans, that way we can illuminate some of the inside of the case. When it was all red, we lost a lot of the details. A lot of the silver turned red. The red inside the cables was completely invisible. It just all looked everything looked red. You couldn't see the silver on the caps right here. You couldn't see the red inside. So it just really started to lose a lot of its, a lot of the way it was designed to be. So what I want to do now, there's some warmth in there because I've been playing around with this on temperatures. I want to show you guys what some of the temperatures look like. So here's our drain for our loop. You guys saw it actually filled really, really easy. The FLT 240 from EK, they come in the 120, a 240, and a 360 version. They have enough depth so that there's enough of a void, or not a void, but a chamber of water to where it can easily fill the pump. So it only took 2 refills to get it fully flowing, and then I topped it off, and then all these micro bubbles that are stuck with surface tension to the acrylic will eventually go away. But this is the way it turned out. The Ballistics Max did boot with the AMD, no problem whatsoever. How warm are those? Because I'm pushing the voltage a little bit. So as you can see, the tops work the color works just fine. I've got a blinky red going. It might look pink on camera, but to the human eye in person, it is red. And I'm only running it at 3800 megahertz because of 1900 F-clock. That's about the highest clock you can reliably get without having to do a lot of custom tuning to get 2000 megahertz and beyond with AMD's memory. So I'm running it at 1-to-1 ratio, which is, or basically I guess 1-to-2 ratio, 2-to-1. 1900 times 2, 3800 on the RAM, that's what we've got. As for the overclocks on the CPU, all I did was turn on Precision Boost Overdrive and then remove some of the voltage limits and stuff inside of the BIOS for this. Remember, this motherboard is built for overclocking. So let's go ahead and take a look at how our Cinebench performance is here. So, oh, and then let me bring up Ryzen Master, that way you guys can see what the temperatures are, because the temperatures are what matter. Remember, it's a single 360 cooling a GPU and a CPU, a 16-core, 32-thread CPU, I might add. So you can see under load, 68C, 68.5, 68, that's doing really good. Because our voltage droops down to 1.324, which is not bad at all. I did do some manual overclocking on this, and I actually got it to almost pass a Cinebench R20 run at 4.9 all-core. It was giving me temperature, saying temperature was too hot, even though it wasn't. It was staying below 90. Some more tuning needed there. But that run right there was a 10,229. Our best run, as you can see, was a 10,323, and I actually had a 10,500, which would beat a 9980 XE. This is just below it, but I did have a run beat a 9980 XE, which is funny because that's got 2 more cores and 4 more threads. So that just shows you how far Ryzen has come. And that's with no tuning. I just turned on Precision Boost Overdrive. So CCX 0 is going up to 4.4 gigahertz all-core. CCX 1, remember it's 0 and 1. CPU core count started at 0, not 1. So CCX 1 is only going to 4. So it's got 300 megahertz less on that. So I could do some per CCX overclocking and get those frequencies up and get an even higher score. But remember, our target here, as you can see, 5.250. It's just we're not nearly cold enough for it to even attempt. But again, pretty modest water cooling setup, to be honest, in terms of radiator sizing. Let's talk about GPU though. This is where I was kind of excited because if you guys remember with the air cooler, we couldn't really push the overclocks very far on this. Maybe I didn't even, thought I did a video about that, maybe I didn't. We couldn't get the overclocks to go very far because although the air cooler is good, temperatures on the junction and all that stuff still get pretty warm. Now, as you can see right here on water, we are currently at 31 and 34. Remember, the lower number is the edge temp, that's the cooler part of the die, and then the junction temperature is the hottest part of the die. So they give you a temperature spread. But you can see we've got our minimum frequency set to 2600, our max frequency set to 2700. Yes, 2700 megahertz. I love the fact that although AMD is behind on the IPC of a GPU, I just love seeing those frequencies because next is going to be IPC. So we're just going to do a heaven run right here. And there's something I need to point out. And it's something I didn't notice on my review as much as I'm noticing it now that it's water cooled. and I believe even Hardware Connects talked about this. The coil whine on this card is off the chain. And the reason for that is the coils that we showed you, those capacitors that are, even though I believe they are solid, they're now being physically touched by the water block to be cooled. Remember I showed you on the first part of this, the first video in this series where I put those thermal pads, the big squares. So with the inductors technically, when you put the thermal pad on top of that, it's a very thin pad and you squish the block down on it, you're now making a very firm connection with those that do vibrate when they're under load. You don't notice it so much with an air cooler because usually they're much thicker thermal pads, if any at all. In fact, I don't even remember if there were thermal pads on it in this particular GPU. Some GPUs don't put thermal pads on that at all, and they don't touch anything. The thickness of that thermal pad already will dampen the amount of vibration and the amount of coil whine that you can hear. Once you put a water block on it, you're now allowing the coil whine to resonate through the big surface area of the block. Allow me to demonstrate. Can you hear that? That buzzing sound? And it changes with frequency. The faster the FPS, the higher pitched it goes. But it's doing it at any FPS. In fact, we can even hear it when I move the mouse on the desktop. Now here's the thing, temperature-wise, because I do need to show you guys that. We are boosting to 2,656 megahertz because this is a manual overclock. Look at the temperatures, 44C on the edge, 62C on the junction. It won't get any hotter than about 65 under load. I've already played around with it. Doing actually a very, very, very good job because it's not even pulling 300 watts for the core, pulling a little more than 300 watt TDP or TBP, total board power. But what I would like to show though, again, look at it. Look how stable it is. That's because the temperatures are doing so good. So it's like pretty much staying within a couple of boost bins from each other, you know, its highest and its lowest. Whereas when it was air, it was just like, it was fluctuating up and down and up and down and up and down, 100 megahertz this way, 100 megahertz that way. But now we've got locked voltage pretty much and a very high clocking card because we added water to it and got these temperatures down. So for those of you that are like, I never hear it in his videos, I'm gonna click the window and when I do, it'll stop the run. And when it stops the run, you can hear it stop. And then I'll click it on and off. That way you guys can hear the coil whine start and stop. It's pretty intrusive. You can hear it even when the case is closed. It's a lot less noisy. However, it is something worth pointing out. Now listen when I stop the test, how loud it gets. Something I didn't really notice with this card when I had the air cooler on. However, I'm still gonna run it. NVIDIA is not immune to this either. There's just certain things that happen on certain cards when they're manufactured that some get coil whine, some don't. This card's coil whine got really bad once we put the block on for the reasons why I explained. And the same thing can happen with NVIDIA as well. In fact, I've had it happen. Little Jay's system, 2080 Ti, never made any noise whatsoever. Put a water block on it, put it in her system, it buzzes just as bad as this, if not worse. She wears headphones, she doesn't care. She's a 12-year-old girl who has a 2080 Ti, she can live with it. So anyway, there you go. The ultimate gaming rig by JayzTwoCents, utilizing the latest impossible to buy parts. Now you can buy the RAM actually, you can buy the motherboard, you can buy the case, the pump, the fans. You just can't buy the GPU or the CPU. No, you can't have it. This is mine. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you in the next one.